Um, we have saved almost the best discussion to the end, which is a discussion about a really significant project, really innovative thinking. So we're going to close out the first day with the 2024 World Progress Summit Report with Michael Running Wolf and Ian Horses, who are the co-founders of the Lakota Code Camp. Michael Running Wolf is a member of the Northern Cheyenne Lakota Blackfeet. He was raised in a rural prairie village in Montana with intermittent water and electricity. So naturally, he came about this honestly. He has a master's with science and computer science. He is a former engineer for Amazon and a former faculty member at Northeastern University. He's currently pursuing a PhD in computer science at McGill University. Michael is researching indigenous languages and culture reclamation using immersive technologies and artificial intelligence. I can't wait to hear about that project, Michael. Ian Horses grew up on the Rosebud Reservation and is a graduate of Todd County High School and the University of Colorado at Boulder with a BS in computer science and a math education certificate. He taught math and computer science in the past at Todd County High School, as well as worked for UC Boulder as a program coordinator for the Indigenous Alliance Program, which is a STEM recruitment program for Native high school students. Currently, he's a PhD candidate at the Colorado University Boulder School of Education, focusing on computer science education. And this is some of the most creative work you're going to hear about today. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Michael, and I think you have a presentation you want to make, and then we can have a dialogue after that. Okay?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Give me a second here. And you should be seeing my screen. So me and Ian are going to be talking about, creating an ecosystem we're bootstrapping an ecosystem for indigenous AI practice. Dr. Ian Horses will introduce himself. I'll talk a little bit later, just to say it's not just me talking. And so, who are we? So we are Lakota kids. We're both from the res. We both grew up in I grew up in rural Montana. My mom won the argument. My dad is originally from South Dakota. And, we're the typical teepee natives. So real quickly, both of us are very interested in this problem of language reclamation. And there's a whole wide world here, but I'll just really be brief. And what you're looking at here is the language families you would find in North America. And so the big bright yellow is the Algonquin language family. This was determined by linguists over the few decades, the past 100 years or so. And the dark blue that goes down through central North America, that's the Siouan languages, which includes Lakota, Nakota, and a few others. My research project focuses on the West Coast. So you can see there's in the far northwest of the United States, the farthest, most western part of America in Washington State. I'm working with the tribe there called Makah, and I'm also working with communities in Canada. Because, as you can see, tribal languages pre-existed the modern boundaries. And so the core research I'm doing is around artificial intelligence recognition for indigenous languages with the objective of building artificial intelligence for language education, so increasing the pedagogy through technology. And I'm a former Amazon Alexa engineer, as the senator mentioned. And so I got really interested in how we can apply these technologies for our communities. And a component of that, and the research maybe backing up just a bit here, is that languages in North America, including Lakota, are very different from languages in Europe, such that AI technologies that you would use for French or English or German do not work for languages in North America, including Lakota. And so a component of this, of course, is that our sovereignty, indigenous data, indigenous culture, tends to be very valuable. Like for this is a beautiful winter count, and it's currently sitting in the Smithsonian. And this is my family's. We would love to have it back, but of course it's locked away for its own safety, quote unquote. But we're also concerned about our own data sovereignty. Like, how do we protect our culture from being exploited, and how do we retain ownership without it being lost, like other cultural artifacts in the past? When it comes to AI, and big data, easiest thing is if we do it. However, There's very few of us. There's very few there's like one Dr. Hermity Horses, and he's probably the only CS PhD in the world who's indigenous. It's very likely. And for a while there, I was the only Native American faculty of computer science. There's like two of them now. And so we just have a lack of talent. Number two, my research crosses Canada and in the United States. And what you notice is that we're spread out. Our indigenous community, this is the 500 recognized tribes in the United States. Our communities are primarily rural and primarily dispersed. Like you see some hotspots, like Lakota country and Dakotas. My reservation is on Rosebud County across the border in Montana. But for the most part, we are geographically separate. We're geographically and culturally diverse. And there's a rich culture of language. A lot of our languages don't intersect. And so we're separated and largely rural and isolated. And so we face the general problems as the discussion here at the summit of we don't have internet, basically. And so what you have here is a scenario and a situation where the technology, the risk of losing our data to large data infrastructure and data brokers and losing our privacy, and we don't have the talent. And this has the side effect of being a barrier that hems us indigenous communities in and it reduces our access. So how do you build AI given these limitations that are just intrinsic to the current system? Because we're all rural, we all face the same problems as we're talking about at the summit. You just do it is the solution. So taking the cue, in 2018 and 2019, I had the great fortune of meeting a Maori research group called Tihiku. They're based in New Zealand, and they had built the very first indigenous AI in the world. It was completely grassroots. They got a very small grant from their government, and they decided we're going to build our own AI. And so since then, taking the cue, and they are the mentors of my research, which I'm calling the First Languages AI Reality, which is a sister project of another component of this is now. This is the research. We're showing a great bit of bias for action, but we need a talent to conduct the fundamental research. And then I'm going to let Ian talk about that a little bit.
All right. So, as Michael said, we need talent. There's not a ton of us. And so my part of kind of what we do within our organization is, I'm a teacher educator. I'm an educator at my core. I build people. And in the CS space, I build people who build things and probably also other people. So Lakota AI Code Camp is one of those things where we have an opportunity for Lakota high school youth to come and learn how to build things with AI. It's not brush over the high level concepts of it, like they can walk away and talk about what it is, but we actually create something. So in this image here, we have Linda Black Elk. And then here we have some students, they're actually doing the work here. So ultimate outcome for our project is students are building a plant recognition app. So there's cultural knowledge built into that of like, hey, what were the plants that were known to us? What did we use them for? They gained that knowledge going out on a walk, but we're also collecting all of the data. And we use that data to create a mobile application where they point their phone at something and it spits out whatever information that they wanted. Along with that, right, we're getting them into some data science components. We're teaching them how to code in Python in week 1. We're getting into some data science as well in week 1. By week 2, we're building a model. And then in week 3, we're building that mobile application so that students can tie this knowledge, tie these tools and resources to something that is meaningful to them personally, but also something that is meaningful to their tribe and their culture and to help us to support ourselves, right? Like Michael said, the only thing that we can do is really just to start doing it. And so that's what we're trying to do here. In the first year, we started with 7 students. Last year, we had, I believe, 13. This year, we had applicants that we had to turn away. So this is serving a major role in inspiring students to pursue computer science, to kind of have that dream, and to support the communities in understanding what it could mean for us. We've only had a handful of seniors pass through the program. We've taken them all the way down into 8th grade going into 9th grade year. And of, I believe, our 5 seniors at this point, 4 have chosen to pursue computer science within a higher education institution. And some of these students were not even considering college prior to the camp, or were considering going into the trades. In trades, no, I don't mean to fault them, but like they were selling themselves a little short for what they could do. And so this serves as a big inspiration for them. And so, yeah, now they're in college trying to create this indigenous future that is a possibility if we have the people that can do the work.
Yeah, thanks. And what we're trying to do is build to this scenario where the technology works for the communities, through the research I'm conducting myself, through FLAIR, First Languages AI Reality. We're building the talent ourselves through the Lakota AI Code Camp, which Ian is in charge of. And in this way, then we also solve the problem of how do we protect our data? We do it ourselves. If we do it ourselves, our communities themselves are well protected and abide by our cultural norms. And the goal ultimately is to build technology and people and resources that bridge communities that work for our rural communities and the diversity that are represented here in the Great Plains, and also allow indigenous communities to define the future that we want as we exist in the era of AI, big data, technology, and how do we communicate and participate and have agency of this technology and not just be participants. And if you'd like to know more information, here's some QR codes. Maybe you can take a quick snapshot. But on the right here is the Lakota AI Code Camp website for more information, and my research is on the left. And thank you very much. This is just a quick overview of the work that me and Ian are doing.
Well, it's way too quick. I will tell you that. I all along the way, I'm just like smiling because this is what happens when you take people who are knowledgeable, who've received important training, but also appreciate how you can take something that is so modern, like AI, and apply it to some of the most basic cultural needs, which is preservation of language and culture. And I love your project. So my first question is, there can't just be two of you if you're going to have a bigger impact. So how do you plan on scaling this? What's the plan for kind of broadening your reach? And how could somebody who's watching this be helpful to you two kind of moving forward?
I think so my focus obviously is on the automatic speech recognition, and there are probably only 12 of us in North America, including Canada, who are indigenous practitioners of AI. I know 10 of them. Ian's one of them. We actually have half of those people amongst us. So we're just the two representatives of a larger team. There's probably, what are we up to, about 10 now, Ian?
I think so. think about 10.
Yeah, and 6 of them are hard AI people. We have PMs and all that. But maybe, Ian, you can talk about, T3. Like I need fellow researchers. But Ian has been developing a program called Teach the Teacher.
Yeah, so in terms of scaling, we recognize that like our time is limited. I have a day job. I teach future teachers at CU Boulder, but this work can't be pushed off to the wayside. So we need more colleagues, and the colleagues aren't just in the work that Michael's doing, but also colleagues in the education space who can teach these camps. Like we don't want to just keep this to Lakota country and we just do it forever, because that is probably an option. We could fundraise and always just keep it there and do this small thing, but that's not in the spirit of us being good relatives to all the other folks around. So we got some funding from Google to scale this up. And as of right now, we have 20 future teachers for these camps. We tried to set them up as pairs for different regions. So we have some folks all the way up in northern Canada. We have a couple teams from the Four Corners area. And the goal is to teach them how to run their own camps, but not just in the ways that we did it. So we initially chose an image recognition model, like the mobile phone app is going to point something at a plant and point the camera at the plant and it'll tell you what it is. But more so, what's going to work for your community? What are the community challenges? So when we come together, we have 5 weeks together over the summer. The first week's just going to be going over our curriculum, as it is, because it's an easy to reach for thing with image recognition. But the second week is we're going to bring in one of our other colleagues, Sean Sosi, who has a PhD in mathematics, and this is kind of his specific areas, developing these new models, and figure out what do we need to shift here to work for your community, right? That student-centered, community-centered approach is so important to what we do, and so yeah, we're expanding this out. Ideally, we will have 10 more camps in 10 other communities in the next couple years as we help those folks to spin up. But ultimately, the barrier, the first barrier to overcome is knowledge within that community, and that's what we're trying to address right now. Both knowledge of how do I build stuff using these AI tools, but also how do I teach it, and what does that mean, and how do I center students within that space in their own interests, right? How do we help them to drive that?
Yeah. So, Michael, this is probably a question for you. Looking at language preservation, which is an issue that I worked on when I was in the United States Senate, I heard and visiting elders in Indian country in North Dakota, typically, I would hear a lot of complaints. And the complaints were that the people who were working on language preservation were not native speakers. They were people who maybe came from Germany who thought that they knew the Lakota language, and I can give you a couple examples of getting an earful from an elder about you think you're preserving language and you are really injuring our language by funding and by promoting people who don't know the particular nuance of what we're saying. So how do you prevent that? How have you involved elders in your language preservation, and how do you overcome the kind of argument that some of the programs that are now being utilized are not necessarily culturally appropriate?
So that's actually, that phenomenon you just described is exactly why I'm doing it.
Well, I figured that.
Originally, so I'm a mutt, so I'm Lakota, Blackfeet, and Cheyenne. And my mom won the argument, so I grew up Cheyenne. But I spent quite a bit of time on my dad's home country in South Dakota, and I think we have cultural differences, and so that's like critical component number one. Outsiders tend to lump us together, and see, even like amongst the seven Lakota nations, the seven bands, that we don't have a lot of the same interests. Like we're constantly making fun of us, like the Rose Brothers. You can't trust them, except for maybe Ian. And so we're different, but we keep being lumped together. And
I want to say this, Michael. One thing that is consistent is Indian humor.
Yeah,
we heard a lot of that.
Yeah, and so I think it's just fundamental that we need to do it ourselves. Like, who's going to protect our, like here's the problem with that is that sure, outsiders speak Lakota or Cheyenne or Blackfeet. That's a problem because, they don't necessarily respect it, and they're trying to take ownership. But what's the real problem is more mundane. It's researchers, linguists, well-meaning external who want to help us preserve our language, but what we really need is language reclamation, where the language is being spoken again. Like, my goal isn't to create technology. Ian's goal isn't to create interesting curricula. We're trying to create educators and practitioners of our languages who are also computer scientists, because that's what we really need. We need advanced technicians. Just like pull some stats from, I was looking at the BLS Bureau of Labor Statistics. An average Native American, we make like half the average of an average American citizen on a yearly salary. Imagine if and the average American citizen is making around $50,000 to $60,000 in North and South Dakota, median income. A computer scientist in North and South Dakota is making around $120,000 a year. Imagine if we had all these indigenous practitioners of AI also doing language reclamation with a high value salary of around $100,000. that's really going to change it, be transformational for our economies. And it's also going to, position our languages and our culture for the digital age so that we can begin deriving value from our own culture rather than exporting it as books and trinkets and, the usual, the spirit beads that people sell, like authentic Lakota spirit beads that I'm going to tease you one more time. Ian is known for. Yeah.
So Ian, how do you build demand for what you're building, or is it just overprescribed? Tell me how you do the outreach to the students.
That has been a serious challenge over the years. Like I said, the first year we had 7 students, and we had to pull on those students to get them in. So I think it's building an understanding within communities of what this could mean and what tribes and communities can do with it and what it could mean for the individual and what individual things they can build. So as we've gotten those stories out, I think that's helped us to get to a point where we're having to turn some students away who are applying. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer in a champions model. You get your champions, they be that symbol, and they kind of help to lead, but then you have to continue to support those champions. And so that's kind of our next step is how do we continue to take these amazing students that we've built this dream into and given them some skills, how do we continue to support them all the way through so that they are working with Michael, they are making a dent in those number of CS PhDs in the world. And yeah, it's stories. Stories are central to our communities just in general. I think that's kind of true for just about every community. And so building those up, being able to disseminate those, making sure those students know that they have a place both in their home world and in the greater world, to let them be successful. And then, when they reach for help, we're there to try and help them. That's going to be a big scaling challenge for us, but if we get there, I will be very glad to have that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, and
I want to add one real quick that Ian's not mentioning. So Ian should be very proud. So we're having trouble convincing kids to join us because they don't think they can do it. Our youngest kid for the past 2 years, was 13 years old. And she was our best programmer and her relationship to the internet was through her phone. And never really had a desktop, was food insecure. And we were able to become one of our best programmers. And it's just convincing kids that you don't need anything. Our curricula is focused, or the curricula that Ian has developed and led is focused upon people who don't necessarily have all the resources that you would normally have.
yeah, I think that's critical. And never mind that, you guys are operating in very rural communities, and transportation is always a problem in summer. Always a problem, for students to figure out. I mean, mom and dad are at work and they're home, and are they walking there, or how are they getting to the events? And so, if you guys could leap forward, 20 years, and you're now looking back, what do you hope your project will have accomplished in the next 20 years?
You want me to go first?
I'll go real quick, and I'll lead you up. And you can take over. I think we're friends. We hang out all the time. I think I would love it if we had as many PhDs as we are percentage-wise. So we're about 2% of the population. And if we had 2% of the PhDs were Native American, that means there'd be 35 of us per year being produced. And it's not just 35. 35 doesn't seem like a lot. We're producing one, maybe, a year. But those 35 mean that for every
Michael, you mean in computer science, right?
Yes, in computer science or related fields like computer engineering, data science. For every one PhD student, you create 50 master's students. 50 master's students, one of them decides to get a PhD. Of those 50 master's students, about 1,000 of the 1,000 undergrads who want to become a master's, it's about 50. And it kind of whittles down, exponential growth. That means if we're producing 30, we're producing about 35,000 undergrads per year who are Native American computer scientists and undergrad, get in high-paying jobs, contributing to the economy at large. And that's doable. Like, it's not going to take a lot. We just need to invest now and do the practical things now necessary, that Ian's doing.
Yeah, and that does keep me up really well. My goal is it's part of our institutions. The Lakota AI Code Camp is ultimately a stopgap measure. There is a challenge. There is no place for this challenge to be overcome, and so we ended up having to create one. But for other folks, there's CS programs within their schools. They don't have as many barriers to going and getting a CS degree. And so ideally in 20 years, I'm not focusing on this type of work. I get to be kind of the typical computer science ed researcher. I get to teach future teachers within my teacher ed program. Ideally within computer science, ideally those students who maybe got their bachelor's of computer science are from Rosebud or some other tribal space, and they're coming to our program, our teacher ed program, and learning how to be teachers and going back home to their communities and teaching CS within those spaces. In 20 years, I hope we have an institutionalized pathway for students to follow, whether that's in a place like CU Boulder or more appropriately, probably within the tribal ed spaces at tribal colleges, where they are leading on what does good student-centered approaches to computer science education look like. We are so unique and diverse compared to other places in the country at large, right? We have more languages mixed up than all of America combined. And so there's a lot that could be learned just from us looking at ourselves within computer science education, and a lot we could contribute to the advancement of computer science ed. And how do we teach this stuff? How do we help communities to support themselves? So yeah, the goal in 20 years is I'm not doing this. Other folks are doing this, folks that we have supported to get through there, who hopefully have some better ideas than how we have started and improving it and making it better.
Well, and this is an area that's ever evolving. And so I think opening up creative minds to the possibilities, and they're going to be the next generation and iteration of what AI can do. I mean, that's, to me, never mind, the opportunities, the economic opportunities. You're not going to be able to preserve language, with just the team you got. You got to have more people, and to give students an opportunity to do some of the most important work that can happen for their culture, which is preserve their language, seems to me that it's a great selling point for the why. You're teaching Ian the how, and Michael, there's a why there. And the why it goes beyond economics and economic opportunity. It goes to how can these tools be utilized to preserve something that is incredibly fragile and could go away without immediate attention. So yeah. Michael, kind of looking at your funding. You said that you have some help from Google. But how do you sustain this kind of going forward in terms of, to scale it up? It seems like you're going to have to find opportunity to fundraise to raise some money for the project. How do you plan on doing that? So
I think the Lakota AI Code Camp in the First Languages AI Flare research projects is the projects of indigenous, which is a 501c3. If you saw the QR codes, there should be links back to indigenous. So my research is interesting because my research crosses the border. So we're working with a lab that Joshua Bengio founded. He's one of the godfathers of AI. And this is in Montreal, Canada. So we're getting Canadian support for research being conducted in Canada. And then on the state side, we've got we got grants from private foundations and private corporate donations going into the future. We're pursuing NSF grants. We were looking at Red Dot recently, and I think Ian was applying to another NSF grant. And it's an integrated strategy. For the FLAIR research is kind of a weirdo because we have cross-border working, because we're cross-border. But our primary driver is corporate support, because there is interest within corporations to help, increase the diversity within their communities, the corporate groups, the corporate communities, and also, uplift indigenous voices, because we're just very underrepresented within technology sectors. But I think fundamentally, we're also starting to pursue, partnerships with federal government, and we've had early conversations with the Interior Department on supporting our work.
I ask you that question, Michael, because I'm thinking about 3 people I want to send this video to send them your way and say, this is really, really important work. And these guys are really, really almost volunteers at this point, and doing things that are incredibly creative. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to expand your outreach. I mean, I always like to think I'm pretty informed of the great things that are happening in Indian country. Had no idea that this existed until you ended up on this program. And so you guys are amazing. You are doing really, really important work in the tough circumstances in a lot of cases. But I think the kind of way that you're approaching it, Ian, which I think is so smart, which is let's give people something tangible. We're going to give you some in classroom, but we're going to take you out and show you this thing, and then connect them to the thing, right? Not to the theory, but to the application. And I think that's how you hook people. You hook people in the kind of practical application. And I look forward to, ultimately, Michael, my question is, will your product be able to translate native languages across native languages?
So the scientific goal right now is, the statistics, unfortunately, are very grim. In the United States, 90% of our languages, as being tracked by UNESCO, the United Nations, are endangered. They're not just endangered, critically endangered. So we're probably going to lose, if we don't do anything, 70% of our languages in the United States in the next 5 to 10 years. And fortunately, Lakota is one of the stronger languages. I think we're only technically considered threatened because there's still, their grandparents are still teaching their grandchildren. But a lot of communities in the United States don't have that validity, so like that strength. And so we're working with communities on the West Coast where we have maybe only, Lakota has thousands of speakers, by the way, across the different major languages. In Washington, for example, Washington State, a lot of communities only have maybe a dozen speakers. And so the technology I'm focused at isn't, like, in theory, we could build a Siri or Alexa or a Google Assistant, but what we're focused primarily is very practical of how do we create AI applications that work on the phone that then correlate with in-class curricula. So you go to class, usually language education is evenings for adults, they go after work, and then they can go home and they can practice. Like a big barrier for a second language acquisition student is, they feel shy. And if you have an AI that just sort of neutrally judges your pronunciation and enunciation, it's going to increase your confidence and you're going to feel more comfortable speaking, because that's the real critical part. Yep. Even if you don't speak correctly, it's enough that you feel comfortable to try. And that's like the real critical component. Like there's that barrier where if you're learning French or German, you just don't know, I'm going to say this wrong and they're going to be rude to me. That getting over that hump is a huge leap forward. And then once you get past that and you feel comfortable talking to your elders, you begin to naturally just pick up the language. Because the human mind really wants to learn more languages. It's actually quite easy once you get past that hump. And not to say it's easy. It's never easy. There's a lot of cultural expectations with learning the language, and people feel ashamed that they don't speak the language, so they don't even try it because they don't want to get caught for not being able to know. People know they don't speak their languages, don't speak Lakota, and so our goal is just to create technologies that make it a little bit easier on their journey, and our objective is to create shallow technology. Once we solve the technological barriers found in the Northwest, we can scale that technology to all the other languages. And so we will be working with communities in South Dakota soon, probably next year, start building a Lakota automatic speech recognition with communities here who are interested both in the code camps and in the research. And so eventually these two projects are distinct right now, but eventually they will merge, at least to some. It depends on Ian, how much he wants to hang out with me.
It's all up to you, Ian.
But eventually the research is going to be the curriculum. And when it's like last year, we did every morning, we did introductions in Lakota. So the kids, we got them up. It's called stand up. I used to work for Amazon and IBM. You get up and you talk about what you did yesterday, but we forced them to do it in Lakota. And they were being forced every morning to, work on their public voice and speaking to a crowd of their peers, and then doing it in Lakota so that every day became expected. And what if we leaned into that, where the Lakota Code Camp is a Lakota immersion camp, where I really want to go, like the part two to your question of where I want to see in this 20 years. We're teaching AI in Lakota in the school to Lakota kids. That's where we really need to be. Like, it can't be just a language extracurricular. I think if we teach math in Lakota.
Big dreams. And I have absolutely no doubt, having met the two of you, that if this is possible, it will get done. Congratulations to both of you. Thank you so much for being part of our Rural Progress Summit, and we mean that, progress. I think people talk a lot about Indian country, but don't realize all the great things that are happening in Indian country. Yeah, Michael, you want a final word?
One last request. So I'm going to hold you accountable to remind your staff to set up a meeting between me and Ian, and let's have an offline conversation. On air, force you to agree.
So let me know when you guys hit an impasse. We'll schedule another Zoom for you guys to smile at each other and be nice, right? Is that how that works, Ian?
Oh yeah, we're nice. Joking is not necessarily not nice. It's how you know you're part of the community.
Yeah. No, I know. I have been. I wouldn't say a victim, but I have definitely been targeted by Indian humor. So it all works out. If you grew up in a big family, even in my family, how you know someone really loves you is it's the one who's teased the most, right?
Yeah, we have something similar.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much, both of you, for this presentation. And I hope that we can do more to help you expose what you're doing. I think it is just, a wonderful, wonderful project. And so we hope that you can be part of the One Country family going forward, and we can figure out ways that we can help each other.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
You bet. Okay, that's the end of the day. And so I want to thank everyone who has been home watching us or in the office watching us. I think it's been a terrific start to the Rural Progress Summit. We're going to be back noon tomorrow with more great speakers and panels, including a conversation with Debbie Stabenow, who is currently trying to work through all of the intricacies of the Farm Bill. Representative Shelley Pingree from Maine, and NFU, National Farmers Union President Rob LaRue on the state of the Farm Bill. I'll do the conversation with Debbie first, and then we'll do the panel. And then, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be subsiding, the fentanyl crisis in rural America. Conversation between about what that is and some creative ways that communities are struggling, but also striving to kind of fix this problem. Then we're going to have a conversation with the team behind the film War Game, which I happen to play a part in. It's a documentary, and I think you guys will really appreciate kind of the work that's been done to try and sound the alarm about the future of our democracy. An update on the Crossroad Project One Country is supporting, how we can deliver rural broadband and close the last mile of service, and a feature conversation with Ruth Guillat about Project 2025. And if you don't know about Project 2025, you need to pay attention, because this may be the blueprint for where we go in this country and how a second Trump term may impact rural America. For our audiences on Zoom, the virtual lobby will remain open throughout the summit, so please visit our great sponsors at their booths. Again, the summit would not be possible without their generous support. And for our viewers on Facebook, please register for the summit to join the conversation in the Zoom room, or look for our page tomorrow for all of our great discussions. And if you like what you had today, please look up a One Country project. Look at our podcast. It's called One Country, The Hot Dish, on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. These conversations we're having, like I just had with Michael and Ian, we have those every other week. And we bring different voices, usually hopeful voices, to a discussion about what's happening in rural America. And you have to kind of put up with my brother Joel, just have to say. So we have deep dives, thoughtful conversations, and a lot of fun. And so here's keeping it real. Here's keeping our commitment to rural America and a vibrant rural America on the forefront of the policy burner. And so I hope that you've enjoyed this, and we will be with all of you again tomorrow. Take care and have a great night.